I'm Grant Stern, and this is PINAC News. Today we're with PINAC photographer Mo Gelber and Warren Redlich of Fair DUI to discuss the New York Police Department's NYPD's attack on peaceful protesters that resulted in numerous arrests during protests that went from Manhattan across the Brooklyn Bridge and ended in front of Brooklyn's Barclays Center yesterday, April 14th, 2015. Mo, thank you very much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Mo, can you tell me a little bit briefly what happened yesterday? Who was the group that did the protests?
There's a group called RevCom, and I think they were the ones who organized the protest, and it was called A14 Shutdown, A standing for April. And they had some people speak at a rally, like Dr. Cornel West, and some other people who have had relatives or friends injured or killed unjustly by the police. And it started in Union Square in the North End on the Barnes and Noble side, and people were completely peaceful. You know, they were
chanting. And for our audience that's not in New York City, that's in Manhattan.
That's in Manhattan.
Around what area?
Well, the area is actually called Union Square.
Okay.
And it's a place where many protests begin. And people always come there with whatever political message they have and that they want to get out and hold their signs. Sometimes it's organized, sometimes it's not organized, sometimes it's just a single person with a sign, and sometimes there are groups that get together and hold protests there. Happens almost every day.
Now, I'd like to bring Warren into the conversation. Warren, I know that you're a New York attorney, but from upstate New York. Can you elaborate on what kind of permits or permissions can be required for a protest to occur up in New York?
Sure. In general, the government has the power to what's called impose time, place, and manner restrictions on speech. So they can limit where you can be, or and the idea in New York City, and I actually have been to events at Union Square like he's describing, and they will. The government has some interest in saying, hey, let's keep this orderly, let's not interfere too much with traffic, that type of thing. So they have the power to do it. And my understanding, like in upstate New York, there's not a whole lot of permits required. In New York City, they're much more vigorous in imposing permitting requirements on events like that.
Now, Mo, can you tell us a little bit? Do you know if this was a permitted protest? How did you wind up in the mix for this event?
Well, I saw a postcard, might have even been on the subway a couple of days ago, that spoke about this event, and it's something that I believe in, and I wanted to attend the event, and I wanted to photograph the event. I believe there's way too much police brutality going on in our country, and it has to stop. And one of the ways is to speak out against it and to peacefully protest it.
Now, did you know that this protest was going to wind up crossing the Brooklyn Bridge and going on that far, or did you just kind of follow along?
I followed along, and I don't believe that the protest was supposed to go over the Brooklyn Bridge into Brooklyn. And according to some of the cops that I spoke to at the beginning, before they marched, because I wanted to get in the right place to get good photos of the march, and I asked the cops, do you know which direction the march is going? And they said that it's going downtown, down Broadway, and it's going to end up at One Police Plaza, which coincidentally is right next to the entrance to the Brooklyn Bridge. It's around the corner from there. And the march, first there was a rally, and there were speeches for about an hour, and then the march went peacefully. And when we got to One Police Plaza, they had it barricaded with gates and surrounded by cops. We couldn't get anywhere near there. And also along the way, the cops were using this tactic that they have of, it's sort of like a divide and conquer, where there's a big group of 1,000 people, and it might be too many people for the cops to deal with, so they kettled people and forced them and funneled them into different directions. So the original group of 1,000 might have been splintered into 5 smaller groups of 200, all going in different directions. And that was at the behest of the cops. They kind of forced it that way by blocking streets with their motorcycles or with their bodies or with gates or with these big orange nets that they would spread across the street. And then you couldn't walk through there, so you just make a right or make a left.
Now, when the group went across Brooklyn Bridge, you guys walked across Brooklyn Bridge, and then I saw the photographs in your set of people actually scaling the Brooklyn Bridge to get to the upper levels where is that a normal pedestrian access area, by the way, or are those upper levels like service access? Because at a certain point, according to what you wrote, protesters were forced to evacuate the Brooklyn Bridge at the behest of cops who diverted the march there.
Yeah, so we kind of were forced onto the bridge. And you have to be a native New Yorker to know that bridge. You have to have been on it before to know which path to take to get on it. There's a roadway. There are 2 roadways, one going from Manhattan to Brooklyn and another roadway going from Brooklyn to Manhattan. And then in between those 2 roadways, about 20 feet in some places and maybe 30 feet more in the middle of the span, above the roadway, is a pedestrian and bicycle path. And it's kind of confusing if you don't know your way around there. You might accidentally walk onto the roadway instead of going to the pedestrian path because there's no clear sign there. But most of the people, myself included, I went into the pedestrian path. I wanted to speak my mind at this rally. I wanted to take pictures, but I didn't want to walk onto the roadway and risk getting hit by a car or risk getting arrested. But there were maybe 40 or 50 people that walked onto the roadway.
Now, I want to ask Warren real quick. Warren, is this kind of thing allowed typically? Is this legal in the state of New York to walk down a roadway?
Yeah, of course you're allowed to walk down this. You're not supposed to walk in the middle of the driving lane, but certainly you'd be allowed to walk down the side of a roadway unless the roadway is marked no pedestrian traffic. And even if it is, most police have better things to do with their time than trying to get people. As long as you're not creating a hazard, police have more important things to do with their time than doing that, unless they have some other reason.
Well, also, I mean, is this an infringement on people's First Amendment rights? I mean, they were walking down the bridge, and the police gave an order with the force of law to evacuate this bridge. Is this something that our police agencies should be doing in this kind of circumstance, especially when citizens are merely petitioning their government or protesting against it?
Well, I don't agree with the characterization that you're walking down a roadway petitioning the government. If you're actually at a government building, then you're petitioning the government. If you're walking down a roadway, I'm not sure where the government official is that you're speaking with at that moment. But you have the right to travel. It's not just the First Amendment right to speech, it's the right to travel. You have the right to walk somewhere. So the question is, what is it that you're doing that's creating a problem or violating a law that gives the police the justification to intervene? The one document I saw that you sent me in advance was like a notice to disperse and get out of the roadway. If they're on a sidewalk, then police have no business getting people off a sidewalk.
Well, let's hold off on the sidewalk because that's more towards the end of the story.
Right.
We haven't even gotten off the Brooklyn Bridge here with Mo yet. Mo, are you okay there on the Brooklyn Bridge?
Yeah, so I'm walking across the Brooklyn Bridge on the pedestrian path with hundreds of other people. And we could look down in the roadway and we see about 40 or 50 protesters on the roadway. And they're walking in between cars. And then we get a message that at the other side of the bridge, on the Brooklyn side, the cops were waiting at the roadway to arrest the protesters who were on the roadway, and they were going to arrest them as they got to the Brooklyn side.
Now wait a second. The one thing that's important to keep in mind for our audience, and I want to ask you about this, Warren, the cops were the ones themselves that ordered you guys to disperse and pushed the protest or directed this protest that was aimed at a government building near the Brooklyn Bridge
Right.
to enter the Brooklyn Bridge area, right?
Yes. I mean, they didn't say go on the Brooklyn Bridge, but based on where they set up their fencing and their gates, there was no other choice. It was a funnel, and the only way to keep going forward was to get onto the bridge. That was the only area that was not blocked off by the cops. So they
Now,
directed it
uh,
onto the bridge.
now, Warren,
Yeah.
how does this impact your opinion of this being a protest of government? Is it still a protest of government if the government says, well, you can't protest in front of our headquarters, walk down this bridge? Or
Well,
is that something else? I mean, what are we really dealing with in this circumstance?
I think that Mo is making an excellent point. Mo is making an excellent point when he says that they funneled people onto the bridge, and now they're arresting people for going where they funneled them. Certainly, yeah, if they're going to the police headquarters and then they don't let them in, and then they push them and direct them and funnel them so they go somewhere else, and then they arrest them for going where they funneled them, then that is obviously not appropriate behavior on the part of the police, and something that, most likely, if they got tickets, they're going to get dismissed. Any of them hires a lawyer, they're going to get it dismissed. These things are going to get cleaned up. It's going to be a minor thing, but they are, definitely there. You're going to do your protest. The police knew you were going there, and then they won't let you in, and then they push you somewhere else, and then arrest you for going where they pushed you. That's police misconduct.
Now, I want to point something out before we go any further. There's a book that sits on the shelf behind me, and Mo is actually featured in this book.
It's a great book.
And yes, it's a great book. It's written by Carlos Miller.
Our hero.
We love the book, so check it out if you'd like online. But Mo, you were actually featured for this photo of an NYPD arrest.
Yes.
So this is like not just something that you're doing on the side. This is your full-time profession today, or at least you're doing it professionally today. You're working as a professional photographer. Explain that to our audience a little bit.
Well, there's not much to explain. I have a hobby of photography, and I took this up about 6 or 7 years ago. I got very good at it, and I'm trying to do photojournalism. And I bring my camera with me wherever I go, and I can cover spot news in the street wherever it happens if I happen to be there. Then there are other types of events that I know about in advance that I can show up to. But I make my living shooting private events at night, be it weddings or engagement parties, etc. But during the day, that's what I do. I walk around my camera and I do street photography, street art, and photojournalism.
Okay. Now let's continue with the story. So the protest march goes through the Brooklyn Bridge. There's police waiting to arrest some of the protesters, but did they actually arrest the people walking off the bridge?
No, they were just arresting the people who were on the roadway,
Okay.
but not the people who were in the pedestrian path.
So the people that climbed up the pedestrian path at their own risk avoided arrest.
Yes, because we yelled down at them because we got a message from the Brooklyn side saying, "Oh, guys, you better turn around and walk back to the Manhattan side if you're not in a position to get arrested. For whatever reason you don't want to be arrested, turn around and go back because there's a lot of cops waiting down there. They started making arrests. It's starting to get ugly. If you don't want to be arrested, turn around now." So some people, in desperation, started climbing the metal cables and steel girders of the bridge up 20, 25 feet to get to the pedestrian path. And people were reaching over and grabbing them and trying to pull them to safety. It looked like a rescue operation. And if you look at my photo album, you'll see some photos of that. Other people ran backwards to the Manhattan side, and other people hitchhiked. They just begged cars to stop and say, "We don't want to get arrested. Please drive us back to the Manhattan side." And I even saw two people hailing a taxi, and the taxi stopped for them and took them, probably for a nominal fee, back to the Manhattan side, but they avoided getting arrested.
Okay, so the people that went upstairs managed to continue their protest march into Brooklyn, right?
Yes.
And how far was it until they stopped? Like how many miles? Was it a mile, a half mile? How far was it until they reached the Barclays Center and then blocked the road?
It's probably another mile from the bridge to the Barclays Center. And when everybody got outside of the Barclays Center, that's one of the biggest major intersections in downtown Brooklyn, the intersection of Flatbush Avenue and Atlantic Avenue. So everybody laid down in the middle of the street in an act of civil disobedience, and probably about 200 or 300 cops showed up from every direction. There were already cops, trailing the march on both sides, on foot and on motorcycles, but even more showed up at this intersection. And one of the, I'm not sure if he was a captain or an inspector, got on a loudspeaker and warned everybody. And things were still peaceful at that moment.
Now wait a second. Did they warn everybody? I want to know. Did they warn everybody while they were lying down in the street, or did they warn everybody when they resumed the march?
They warned everybody when they were lying down in the street.
Okay.
And
So they waited until everybody lied down in the street 20 minutes later, because to march a mile takes about 20 minutes.
it probably took about 15 minutes.
Very fast march.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was a speed march.
New Yorkers walk fast.
We
Right.
do.
So okay, everybody is lying down in the street, and then you actually captured a photograph of what I would call the riot act, because that's really what it was. Warren, can you break down for us what you saw in that photograph? Because the photograph that Mo captured actually had all of the text that the NYPD had prepared.
Yeah, it was a reference to a statute saying you're not supposed to basically block a roadway, and it was directions to disperse to get out of the roadway, which, look, they have the right to have time, place, and manner restrictions, and I'm guessing the permit didn't include blocking a roadway, so they're violating that. They're going beyond what the permit allowed, and they're, in general, you're not supposed to be lying down in the roadway blocking traffic, so the police have the authority to do that. The problem here is they were interfered with when they were trying to do what their protest was supposed to do, so the police sort of pushed them into, they took them out of what the permit allowed and then pushed them into other places, and you have to recognize the police contributed to the situation by doing that.
Yep.
Now, as our audience may not realize, the First Amendment is not completely absolute. However, in this case, do you think that the NYPD violated the First Amendment rights of these protesters?
Well, first of all, in the incident where they were going to the police station and the police kept them from going where they had a permit to protest there, and then they blocked them off from that and then started pushing them this way and that way, I don't think it's not only a First Amendment violation, but that in and of itself, preventing the protest from doing what it was supposed to do as it was permitted to do, that is a pretty clear First Amendment violation. And then there's the other violations of pushing them in, interfering with their freedom to travel, and then arresting them for doing something that they had essentially commanded them to do.
Okay, so now they've read the riot act to these protesters. They've told them that you have to take the sidewalk or you will be arrested. After they've done an act of civil disobedience, sitting down right in front of the Barclays Center, right in the middle of Brooklyn, New York. So let's pick it up, Mo. What happened from there? You said that most of the protesters started to go to the sidewalk. Then what happened?
Yeah, so the police got on their loudspeaker 3 times and read that riot act and said, "We're giving you one last chance. You have to get out of the roadway or you'll be arrested. However, if you choose to voluntarily stand up, leave the roadway, and go to the sidewalk, you will be allowed to continue marching, so long as you stay on the sidewalk and don't walk on the roadway." And the police who did get on the loudspeaker seemed like he was being fair, and everybody stood up, walked over to the sidewalk, and then continued walking south on Flatbush Avenue toward Grand Army Plaza, and they were walking on the sidewalk as they were instructed.
Was there any general agreement to go to that specific place? Who was leading the march? How did it decide where to go, where to stop, where to walk? Just curious.
I don't know, and I don't know if at that point there was a leader. I think some of the leaders were the ones who organized the rally And when it got to one police plaza and the police were dispersing the march by kettling people in different directions and forcing some people onto the bridge if they wanted to continue, I think some of the organizers might have stopped there and maybe walked backward. I don't believe they came over the bridge. I didn't see them on the bridge.
Okay, so
at that point, it was more disorganized, and whoever was left, just a small group of 200-300 people, they just kept walking.
so to clarify for the audience, we don't know if there was an actual protest permit pulled or not, or if it included this area or not, correct?
Right. I wouldn't have that information. I don't know.
Okay. So tell us what happened after everybody started marching, on the sidewalk, because this is where things really heat up.
Okay, it gets really ugly at this point. Now, I had started from 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and I felt at this point the march was fizzling out, and I was, getting ready to put my camera away and get on the train and go home. And I was saying goodbye to a couple of friends, and then all of a sudden, and this was probably about 4 or 5 blocks south of the Barclays Center, all of a sudden 150 police start running down the street, barreling over anybody in their way. And they ran, and they were grabbing people from the sidewalk, pushing, beating, kicking, arresting anybody in their path. And that even included innocent bystanders who had nothing to do with the march. They were coming out of stores. They were coming out of a gym. This woman walked out the door of the gym only to be trampled by 100 cops. That was ridiculous. That was outrageous.
So, I mean, was there something at all that precipitated this rush other than a protest and march in progress? I mean, was there any particular act that you witnessed of any sort?
No, I did not see anybody do anything wrong. All they were doing was walking on the sidewalk as they were instructed by the police. And as a police, we call him a white shirt, meaning he was a captain or higher.
Part of the brass.
He was part of the brass. He might have been an inspector, and he said you will be allowed to continue to march, but just keep it on the sidewalk. And that's what they did.
All right.
And 5 blocks later, the cops just started arresting everybody on the sidewalk.
Now, I mean, there's one particular.
Can I ask a question?
Grant,
can I ask a question? Can I ask, what were they ticketed for something? Did they receive paperwork accusing them of an offense?
I didn't see that. They weren't. It wasn't people being summoned, because a summons you just get a piece of paper telling you to go to court in the future. They were actually put in handcuffs and taken onto a bus, and we don't know what happened to them afterward.
Do we know what they were charged with, if anything?
I don't know, but I will get more information today about 4 o'clock when I'm going to meet with some people who might have that information.
Well, how many people have you spoken with that were at the event or that were arrested, whether on the bridge or later on the sidewalk? Have you spoken with anybody from the group since then?
Okay, so I witnessed a journalist with a credentialed NYPD press pass, and when the cops started running and just knocking over everybody, he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And they grabbed him and they said, "You're under arrest." And he said, "Why? I didn't do anything. And I have a press pass. I'm allowed to take pictures." And they just grabbed him and arrested him. And I took a picture of that, and I took a close-up of his press pass, so I got his name, and I sent him a message this morning with the photo on his Facebook, and his name is PJ Landers, and he said that he has some video of the incident before he got arrested, and that he'll share it with me later.
Okay. And I mean, at this point, you're still looking to get any videos that anybody has, if they were nearby as a bystander or as a protester, if they were arrested or not, right?
Right. Now, I'm standing on the sidewalk watching this melee take place, and I'm trying to back up as far as I can because, number one, I didn't want to be too close to the cops to where they could take a swing at me. I also wanted to be far enough away so that my camera doesn't get damaged by the fighting. I must have been about 8 or 10 feet behind where they were arresting somebody in front of a gym, and I had my back to the roadway, and I was on the sidewalk, and I was taking pictures. And a cop came up from the side of me with his bullhorn right in my face and in my ear, and started screaming, "Get back! Get back! Get back!" And I knew that I was on the edge of the sidewalk, and if I would have taken a step backward, I would have been in the roadway, and I would have been subject to arrest, or I could have been hit by a moving car. And I hesitated for 2 seconds to try to figure out what to do, and I didn't move fast enough for him. And two other cops joined him, and one of them put their hands on my chest and pushed me backward. And I fell onto a police van that had just stopped a couple of seconds before to let out, another 10 cops, to join in the fracas. And I hit my head, the back of my neck, and my back pretty hard.
Are you okay today?
I'm okay. I went to the doctor. I went to the doctor this morning, and he said I have a mild concussion, and
Wow.
the rest is just bumps and bruises, and nothing severe. He said my neck and back will be sore for a couple of days, and then I should be okay.
Well, that's still serious. I mean, a minor concussion is still a concussion.
Sure, it is serious, but it's not that serious. I'm not going to exaggerate it and say that I'm permanently injured.
Yeah, but Warren, can you comment on the police behavior in this incident? It sounds to me like this was the riot police going out to suppress a riot or some sort of general lawlessness. Is this appropriate police behavior?
Of course, it's not. Of course, it's not appropriate police behavior. I think the interesting question is when police have an encounter, what is it that the person has done that the police are doing this for? Have they committed some crime? We just saw a video the other day of the police, running into a guy, but the guy was walking around with a rifle, pointing it at his own head, and he fired off a shot, in the air or something like that. That's somebody who's clearly done something wrong, and the police need to use force, maybe not that level of force, whatever, but they need to do something to stop it. But here you've got people walking down a sidewalk following instructions. What is it that they did that triggered this behavior? And we all know the real answer is contempt of cop. It has nothing to do with them doing anything illegal. Some of the police don't like this protest, don't like what they're doing, and they went after them for that. It doesn't sound, I'm only going on what Mo's telling us, but certainly on what Mo's telling us, it doesn't sound like anybody, they're arresting people who are journalists, they're arresting a woman coming out of a store, they're being indiscriminate, and they're not picking people out for having done something wrong, but rather just indiscriminately hitting a group of people. And that's not appropriate police conduct.
So, Warren, do you think that protesters who were arrested or injured, or bystanders who were injured in this police action, do have civil recourse against the police?
Yes, of course you have civil recourse. I find it in general, if you're hurt, if you're actually significantly injured, if, like Mo said, his injuries aren't that severe. I, as a lawyer, would not be interested in that case because the lawyer's analysis is the pot of gold at the end of that rainbow isn't big enough to make it worthwhile. Some lawyers are able to turn something like that into money, but my attitude is that's not the issue. It's not about whether you're going to get money in a civil lawsuit. It's about whether we have a problem with police misbehaving and whether anybody any of the politicians actually care about it, which generally speaking they don't.
Well, Mo, do you have any other comments? And I mean, do you expect more protests to happen in New York City in the next week or so?
Oh, there's going to be so many more of these protests. Last year we had a very serious case in Staten Island, the Eric Garner case that everybody's familiar with. People saw the video of a police officer choking him, and the police officer was not indicted, and people were angry. And they marched peacefully many, many times. There was even one major march that had 40 or 50,000 people. And it was permitted, and the police blocked the streets to allow people to walk in the roadways. They stopped traffic for that. And it was a peaceful protest. And then we had a very cold winter here, and there wasn't that much protest. But the case in South Carolina has stirred the pot up again. Everybody saw that video of the police officer shooting a man in the back and killing him, and it reminded us that we have to keep speaking out, and until the police are held accountable for their actions when they do things improperly.
Now, one last question, Mo, and I appreciate you
Sure,
sticking around with us this long. Do you
sure.
have any tips for journalists, professional or citizen journalists, who are going to be involved in these protests on the streets of New York?
Well, if I have tips for them,
Yes.
yeah. Number one, if you have a very expensive, like $5,000 camera and a very expensive lens, and you're going to a protest, don't bring that camera. Keep that home in your bag. Bring a cheaper
That's
camera.
that's a good
Because
idea.
odds are, even an accident, people, a big group of people are walking, so you might slip and break your camera. Or it could be more egregious. The cops don't want photos or videos of themselves, and they'll break your camera. And don't bring an expensive camera. Get a cheap
Okay.
camera. That's
Okay.
my first advice.
That's a
Uh,
great tip.
yeah. Second is stand up for your rights. But if the police, try to force you to move to where they want you, you should do your best to go along with them, and don't be that guy who gets in their face and yells at them things like "I pay your salary." They don't like that, and then they're going to beat you up and arrest you. So keep taking video. Don't ever turn the camera off. They have no right to tell you to turn the camera off in a public place. But try to be try to be as nice as you can and not offend them. Stand a little further back and get your videos.
Well, that's all the time we have for this interview, and I appreciate both of you guys taking the time out of your day. Warren, where can our audience find you on Twitter or on Facebook, on YouTube?
The best places to find me are anything under the term fair, the phrase Fair DUI on Twitter, on Facebook, on fairdui.org. That's where I talk about DUI issues, and I also talk about other issues like this.
Alrighty, and Mo, where can our audience find your photographs, Twitter, publications that you're working with, etc.?
Yeah, the best place to see my photographs are on my Facebook page, Mo Gelber.
Alrighty. Well, thank you, gentlemen, both. And we're going to continue investigating this topic and reporting on this breaking news story as it unfolds. We would love it if you visit photographyisnotacrime.com, and if you've got a video or a photo or a story to share about this protest that the New York City Police Department broke up, please go to photographyisnotacrime.com, click on our contact form. You can call us, and we'd love to hear your tips. You can also tweet us at PINAC News. For PINAC News, I'm Grant Stern.
Thank you.
Be the media.
Okay, have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.